Welcome back to King's Lab IT Console. In this series, which is part 5 of our series, we're going to talk about DHCP. So you will be going to learn how to install DHCP, and after installation of DHCP, you also will learn how to configure DHCP. Now, what is DHCP? That's what we should ask ourselves. DHCP is a server role in Server 2012 R2, and its responsibility is to lease out IP address to client computers on the network. So any client PC, as we have here, this is our member server. Yes. So we saw that we provided the address to this system manually. So what we can do is that we can also try to obtain an address from the server here. So we are trying to set up our domain controller to also act as a DHCP server. And after doing so, we are going to try to obtain an address from the client system. So you obtain the address using the client system. We're going to try to obtain an address from what? From the DHCP server. So we're going to see how to do that. So in short, DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and its responsibility is to release or lease out IP addresses to what? Client computers. So that is what it does. Alright. So let's see how to go about it. So we have to first log into our domain controller. So we have logged into our domain controller. So as we've been doing, you have to wait for the server manager to load up. Then you could add roles or features, or we click on manage to add roles or features, and then we can also do it from here. So whichever way. Then you can proceed to click on next, and you can see the address that has been given to us is 0.1, and domain controller is dc.kingslab.local. That is our fully qualified domain name. Then we go on. Then we look for, or we're going to look for DHCP. So you can see it says that Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, that is DHCP. Its responsibility is that it enables you to centrally configure, manage, and provide temporary IP addresses and related information to forward client computers. So all related client computers, when they need an address, they have to request for the address from the DHCP server, and the DHCP server receives the request and then release what address or lease out addresses to what client computers, and it has a duration. And that's why it said temporary. So when it's given to you by default, you're going to check on all that. It has a duration of which the address will be revoked back by the DHCP server. If you need it again, then you have to request it from the DHCP server. Then the DHCP server will then lease a new address to your system. That is why it does. So we're going to add or accept this. Now it comes with some, that is it we see here. So we just add it, then you can proceed. Then you proceed once again. You leave everything as it is by default, then you can install. So this is going to take few minutes for our installation. So what we are doing, we are just installing DHCP server role. Now once it has been installed, you need to configure this. So in few minutes it will be done. Good. So now installation is complete now. So when I close it now, you can see now it appears here. So now we have Active Directory Domain Services, we have DNS, and now we have our DHCP. So we need to configure DHCP. So any role that is installed needs to be configured. So we can get this option telling us that. So anytime you see this notification, that yellow symbol here, it is a warning sign telling us that something needs to be done. So you can see that is it. So we're going to configure DHCP. To do so, you have to come to Tools, and then you look for DHCP from here. So you launch DHCP. So let's expand this. So when I expand my fully qualified domain name of this server, so you can see I double click on that, then this is it. So we have IP version 4 and then we have IP version 6, but remember we have already disabled version 6, so we're not going to work with version 6. We're going to focus on what? IP version 4. So what we need to do, we need to first create what? A scope. It says that before a DHCP server can issue IP address, you must create a scope, and then you have to authorize the server. So after the scope has been created, you have to move back to the fully qualified name of the server. Then you will then authorize it. Don't forget that. So we have to come in here to IP version 4. You just right click and then you select new scope. Then we give the scope a name. So let's call this one DHCP, let's say server. Then we proceed. At this stage, it's going to ask you to provide, so when a client system is trying to obtain an address from this server, what address should be given to this client system? That's what we're trying to say. So apart from, as we said, every system should have a unique identity. So apart from 1 and 2, any other address is okay. So we provide 192.168.0 and then 10. So the first client system that is trying to request, or that will try to request an address from this DHCP server, it should give that person 10. Then what will be the last person? So the last person, so to be a range, so to be from 10, 11, 12 up to your last address. So the ending address, I want it to be 0 and then 20. So the last person is going to retain or attain 20 as the address. So the starting ID will be 10. The first person who requests the address will get 10, 11, 12 in that order, up to the last, which is 20. Then the length is 24, which means 255. So 255, 255. He says that when you convert this into decimal, you are going to get 8 bits. So 8 times 3, you get 24. That is why we have this length as such. That is class C address. So now we can proceed. And then this option here is an exclusion range. Now you can decide to exclude an address. When the address is excluded, that means that address cannot be given to any other person. So when it's leased or when it's excluded, that means the address will not be given to anyone. So let's put this address 192.168.0 and then 10. So we are saying that anybody who tries to request the address on the network should not be able to be given what? 8 and 10. That's what it means here. So we provide the same thing. So nobody will be given the address 10 when we request. So it means that now when this is added, anyone who requests for address will not be able to get 10, but the first person is going to start from where? From 11. That's what it means by exclusion. So exclusion means you don't want to give that address to any other person or any client system. Then we move on. So by default, when address is given out to a client system, it's supposed to last for 8 days, 0 hours, and 0 minutes. You can make adjustment depending on the requirements of your organization. For our case, we're going to leave it as it is, and then we can proceed. Then we can now configure this option. So we click on yes. Here they are asking us to provide a router, the IP address of our router. We don't have a router here, so we leave it as it is, and then we can proceed. Then we have our domain name here. So what we can do is that our domain name here is ready, so we can provide our address once again to be sure. And then we put one once again. Let's put it there. Let's try to resolve it. So now it has been resolved, which means it's perfectly working. Or we can also type the name here, that is Kinroos lab.local. Let's try to resolve this, and you can see it has been resolved for us, and it's also perfectly working. So that is how to go about them. So let me just remove and leave only one there. Good. So then let's proceed again. So here they're asking us to provide one server. We don't have any win server, so we leave it as it is. Then you will then activate the scope now. So click on this and then you finish it up. So now our scope is not created. So if I expand scope, you should see this option. Now this is a pool that we have created. We said that nobody should be given 10, and the first range was that the first person should be given 10 and the last person should be given 20. So 10, 11, 12, all the way to what? 20. But we have excluded 10, which means the first person is no more going to get 10, but will then will get what? 11. That's what this one means. Okay, so let's drag it to the side. So anyone who receives an address for the DHCP server, or anytime a DHCP server leases out address to any client system, the information of that client system should be here. That is what happens here. There's one more thing that I want us to see before we even leave. So now let's talk about reservation. Now what is reservation? Assuming you are going to, when you want to reserve an address, this is what happens. You have to ensure that a client is always assigned the same address. Now when you want to reserve an address, then you are trying to tell us that that address should be reserved for a specific client system. Always it will be given to that client system. By default, as you saw that when an address is leased out, it's supposed to last for 8 days. Then DHCP will revoke the address. So if you need it again, you have to request for it from the DHCP server. Then the DHCP server will give you another one. That's what happens. But when you are reserving, it means the system should be present, and you should also know the MAC address of that system. Then you'll be able to perform that task. So let's see. When you want to reserve, you just right click and go for new reservation. So this is it. You need to give the reservation a name. Whom are you reserving it for? So give it a name. That will help you be able to identify. You should know which address that you want to give to the system with the range that we have, and then the MAC address that you want to have. So you should know the MAC address of the client system. So if you want to know the MAC address, you just check the client systems. So let's check it out from here. So that's what you do to check the MAC address. So you see, when I move on here, you'll be seeing what we call physical ID. So this is the MAC address of the system. So on the client system, you have to find out the MAC address of that particular system. Then you come and provide it here. Which means that if the system is not available, or if the system is not installed and is not present on the network, then you can't reserve any address. So that is what happens. So you can exclude the later one. So when you have extra systems and then you want to add it, assuming that you're in a company, you were told that you'll be adding up 2 extra systems to your network very soon. When that happens, when you create a scope, you have to exclude 2 addresses. That is going to be excluded. So when it's excluded, then we will then reserve it, and then which means we are reserving that, then we will give it to a specific computer when the system comes online. So that is what reservation is all about. So that is how to configure the scope. So now that the scope is done, we realize that there's a red sign that's attached to this server, which means it's not working. So what you have to do is that you have to right click on IP version 4, then you should refresh once again. So if I right click now, I see the other options that we can do. You can create extra groups. We have super scope, failover, clustering, and the rest. So what I can do is this. I have to come at the top here, right click, and then authorize the server. So authorize. So it has been authorized. You can see when I refresh now, there should be a change. So now that is it. So now our scope is perfectly working and it's in good health. So the scope is perfectly working for us. So that is how to set up and configure. So how to install and configure DHCP server. So in our next video, we're going to learn how to obtain an address from this DHCP server that we have created. So stay tuned for the next sessions of videos.